Hi, I'm Paul Stringfellow, and welcome to another edition of Tech Takeaways. So again, I've been let loose on my own, just me and a guest. So luckily for everybody, there is a guest. You don't just have to listen to me. And so joining us on this week's episode, and actually join us this week and next week, to talk about the real world of rolling out generative AI, Microsoft Copilot, actually specifically. I'm joined by Nathan Miller. Hi, Nathan. How you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Paul. Thank you for having me back as well.
Yeah, so many of you will may well recognise Nathan. So he did join us a few months back to talk about some Microsoft topics, which included Copilot, and what we wanted to do ahead of an event actually that we're running alongside Nathan's organisation on November the 7th. So you're all welcome to come, and we'll include the links to the event in the show notes. We wanted to kind of get a little bit of a sense check, a little bit of a catch up on some of what's worked with Copilot and rolling Copilot out in organisation. And actually, in the next episode, we're going to talk about some of the things, the lessons we've learned, things that haven't worked quite as well as people might have expected them to. Because I think they're all valuable lessons. And Nathan's going to share with us a little bit about. I'm just teeing you up here, Nathan, for the things you're going to share with us. But it could share us a little bit about his general experience working with other organizations, but importantly, the lessons he's learned in terms of rolling Microsoft Copilot out across a fair size organization, so his own internal rollout of that technology. But before we do any of that, just as a little bit of a reminder, Nathan, for people watching, a little bit about who you are and what it is you do.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm Nathan Miller. I'm the Microsoft Program Manager at Bytes. I understand that job title may not mean much to a lot of people, but essentially it's working with Microsoft, Bytes, and our resellers or customers on Microsoft technologies, making sure that our teams, the sales guys, and I guess the customers can take advantage of every program, product, or sort of funding stream that's available, so they can deploy things quicker or take advantage of new products or funding streams at a very high level.
So Nathan, so I think that's it's a useful, and I wanted to just do that because I think it's a useful introduction because it kind of gives gives for people listening in a view of the kind of breadth of conversations you're having around Copilot as and it's probably worth and maybe this is a good starting point, because we talk about Copilot as this kind of thing that's Copilot's just a thing, but actually Copilot's not just one thing, is it? There's bits of Copilot. So maybe that's just as a bit of an intro and a bit of a level set. When we talk about Microsoft Copilot, what do we mean?
Well, for this conversation, different to the previous one we had. The previous one we had was the Copilot for security. This one we're talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365. So we're talking about the Gen AI assistant built into the Microsoft Productivity Suite. So in English, Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Teams, and being able to leverage AI to make these programs run faster or to seemingly upskill yourself in Excel, for example. So the modern work stack, having this generative AI tool, this conversational tool to speak to enhance your Word documents or Excel, or tell you what's happening at that Teams meeting, for example.
Great. So and I think that's important because Copilot kind of pops up across the Microsoft stack quite a lot. So it's useful that people know that. And so obviously we're going to talk then specifically about this kind of Microsoft 365 stuff. And what I wanted to do in this first episode was to talk a little bit about where this has worked. So what it is you've seen in terms of kind of the wins. So what is it that has worked well? What is it that people have started to use? Copilot 365 for. So why don't we start there? What in terms of what has worked well? What is it that you've seen?
That's a good question. What has worked well? Customers who are using Teams a lot. So I mentioned it's in Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Power BI, and Teams, and many more. But it seems to have been built for Teams, or Wave 1 was for Teams. So Teams is, your instant messaging platform, but it's also where your meetings are hosted. So people doing lots of IMs or host lots of Teams meetings in Wave 1, for example, they'll be more successful. So they'll see a quicker return on investment than people just using, Word, PowerPoint, and Excel. So the ability to, again, you've got to record the meeting. So that's changing behaviors slightly because you've got to make sure everything's recorded or everything's transcribed. The fact that you can have the meeting and then you can then talk to the Copilot or the app and you can ask it to recap the meeting. It can do meeting notes quicker than probably you could do meeting notes, or certainly me. You can then ask it, what are the actions? You just done the notes. Can you assign these actions to people? Can you take these notes and put them into a table or an Excel or something? So you can really use it to be your, I'll say, basic assistant. Very good at doing the basic tasks. Again, you've got this massive Teams channel that, everyone's in, and it's, pinging left, right, and center. You can then ask Copilot, what have I missed? Or I can't quite find something. I know it was in this chat. Can you find it for me? So it's very good at Teams, and it's very good at finding things, which is a positive and a negative if not set up correctly. For example, I know there's a file somewhere. I can't find it. Maybe it's on my desktop. Maybe it's in some file, some folder that I've set up once. I can't find it, but I know I've got it. I can speak to Copilot and I can say, can you find me the business plan for X, Y, and Z? And it'll go away and find wherever it is, which is a very good positive. The negative that I might come to later is, if not set up correctly, I might find things that I shouldn't have. But yeah, Teams meetings, Teams chats, and what used to be called M365 chat, that can you go and find and surface information, have been big wins for Copilot.
Yeah, and I think that's actually a really good point in kind of why that's worked as well, because I think it's important that people, and I think people do in general, have started to, or at least started to cotton onto this. These tools aren't designed to replace the things that you do. They are there to kind of augment and make easier. And I think you've made a really good point in that a lot of this kind of, a lot of these kind of, and Copilot's becoming a, so while Microsoft use Copilot as a product, that idea of Copilots is becoming kind of an industry-wide phrase almost, or a standard for these kind of tools that make it easier. And I think Teams is a really good example that you've just talked about there. These are a set of tools that make this easier for you to investigate and search through lots and lots of information, and then do things like summarize that, create actions from it, that kind of thing. Is that kind of accurate?
Yes, and I think I said it on the previous podcast that everyone at one point was scared that this is going to eventually sort of take over my job, and I attempted to assure people that won't happen. And it was like someone, AI won't replace you, but someone using AI might replace you, because they will make the small jobs, or the basic jobs better or quicker. Or say you're not very good at PowerPoint. In theory, you can speak to Copilot. It might be able to make a better slide than you. So therefore, it's instantly made you look more skilled than you actually are. So it's sort of pushing skill levels up. But again, if you're rubbish at PowerPoint and someone else is rubbish at it, but can use Copilot, they're probably going to produce something a bit better. So it's just taking those, I don't want to say mundane tasks, but it probably is. Some people take those mundane tasks and making them, slightly better or quicker.
Yeah, and I think again that's a really good point. I think that kind of phrase that you used before, it's not that these kind of technologies are going to take your job, but somebody who, again, I don't want it to sound too like a scare tactic about, well, if you're not using Copilot, you're going to lose your job. This isn't what I mean. But I think people who know how to use those tools may well become more efficient and effective at what they do than you will be. And actually from a business point of view, if you want to look at whole business, I think there's a lot in that about, you hear this conversation a lot that, if you're not, and again, without this trying to, neither of us are salespeople, Nathan, I think. So without trying to sound too salesy, this idea that if you're not using these technologies, your competitors are. But I think there is a truth in that as well, in that, you've got to think about your competition in the market will definitely be exploring ways they can use some of these tools to allow them to be better at what they do and be more efficient and serve their customers better. And if you're not doing them, you might well find yourself at a disadvantage. Again, I mean, in your experience of what you're seeing in the real world, and maybe some of your own experience, again, is that true, or is that a bit of marketing hype?
No, I think we are seeing that to be true, and we are also seeing my competitor might have this. When Copilot, so it was released to, should we say, the masses in two waves. The enterprise customers, as long as they could commit to that amount of buying a minimum of 300, they could buy it sort of this time last year. So they could be coming up for renewal now, and we're seeing some trends in that. But the masses, the SMBs, the small customers, were then allowed to purchase it from February. And we have been seeing, when it becomes available, it's almost driven, the want is driven from the top down. So you have the MD, you have the CEO seeing this, this cool tech, or my mate, my other CEO friend has got it, and it's like, I want to compete against each other to get it first. So they get it because it's a fear of, competitor might have it, or other connections might have it, but that might not be the best use case for Copilot because that person's got it for bragging rights or to say they've got it. Potentially, is the CEO of a company the best person to leverage that technology from day one? Maybe not. Maybe they're not in the weeds where Copilot will work more effectively. Yeah, we're seeing the drive from if they've got it, they might be better. They might end up being better than us, so let's us get it as well, which has a negative effect on the rollout of a product. In my experience.
So that's a really interesting point, actually, and it wasn't a question I thought of, but it just kind of made me think about it. Because when we talk about where it's won, so we talked about Teams initially, and I was going to go, well, any other kind of products, but you raise a really good point about actually the right people using tools like that inside of an organization. So have you seen, whether it's your own example or elsewhere, have you seen examples of the type of teams or the type of people who are getting the most out of something like Copilot?
Yes, I had in my head it was a type of people, because I thought in my mind, about to sort of be stereotypical or anything. I thought it'd be the younger person that's used to using certain apps or things like that. Completely wrong. It wasn't that younger person at all. When we did our sort of initial rollout, there was people of a different generation that were picking this up quicker than what I thought the other generation would have done. So I thought there may have been like a generational compete almost. That seemed to sort of be a little bit irrelevant almost. I hate the phrase, but it is the information worker. It is that person that is, should we say, content creators or content manipulators. So people that are building, so marketing, for example, seem to be able to produce blogs quicker. Copilot won't write the blog. It will try. The issue being if it writes a blog for you, it'll write the same blog for your competitor or them and other people, because it'll pick up on, if you're legal tech, I'll pick on legal tech and whatever you sort of give it. So it'll be very generic, but that could be a good starting point. So people that want to create content, we're seeing them sort of pick it up quicker. So that's from a marketing point of view. We're seeing, I guess, developments. They had a version of Copilot a little bit earlier than the modern web version. There was a GitHub Copilot, so they can use it to start coding. So you can start off the initial coding, and they'll take it, they'll debug it, and they'll do what they do. I can't pretend to be a developer, but they can use it to get themselves going. So it seems that people that are creating things for code, marketing, or people that need to manipulate data like massive Excel spreadsheets, seems that they can use it to sort of get themselves started with an idea. How do I manipulate this? How do I create this? How do I start this blog? I'm the expert in the topic, but I don't know how to start it. It can do that, but then you will need to sort of carry it on. So it's those people that are more in the day-to-day of actually creating things that seem to have picked it up.
Yeah, and I think that I think that content creator thing is, and while we're not saying these are the only use cases, because you talked about content creators, you talked about developers in there, I don't think they're the only use cases, but I think in terms of, it's a phrase I hate, but it's a phrase we use a lot in the industry, but where the quick wins are potentially for you as an organization. And I think a hugely important point about if you're going to roll this kind of stuff out, and we can talk about this maybe in the next episode about the valuable lessons that perhaps where this works and where it doesn't. But I think making sure you put the tool with the right people is going to be kind of a better return on that investment than not. So as we come to kind of the end of this initial chat about things that you've seen that has worked, I suppose one of the things that you might have seen that so what for we like to have little takeaways. We call it tech takeaways for reasons. We like to have those kind of little takeaways. So what would be for people maybe who are still looking at Copilot and thinking, well, where would this work well for me? You've talked about some of those examples, but kind of where would those better wins be? What would those places where you're seeing Copilot work best? What would be your takeaway for somebody looking at this and saying, well, you know what, if you want to see some results from Copilot, maybe focus on these kind of applications of it.
I think the first takeaway is to avoid the temptation of buying one license. Let's realize that to get the most out of it, sadly, you might have to spend a bit more than the one license. I think buy more than one license, try and get a good spread across several departments. We've seen it work in set departments, but all companies are different. So more than one, a spread, don't just pick one department because you'll get probably the same results. Yes, people work differently, but picking the sales team, you'll get the sales answers. So try and get a good spread across different teams. But try and pick things that you generally see as repeatable. So another example, I just turned up thinking of the sales team actually. Tenders, lots of partners, lots of customers have to tender, either, writing the tender as a customer or responding to multiple tenders as partners. A lot of that information is the same. The tender being made up, who are you, what do you do, why should I pick you, and then the price of whatever you're selling. The price is going to be, bespoke, but the other sections are going to be generic. So yeah, you might copy and paste from previous ones, but get Copilot to write that first part, get Copilot to generate it all. The quick generation of repeatable stuff like that, or again, the content creation of blogs. Yeah, I would suggest go for things that you see as repeatable that you do every day, and you will see the speeding up of those processes.
I think that's a great tip. Actually, I think there are a couple of great tips in there. So, well, look, Nathan, it's been really good. Really insightful. And I think it's interesting to see, that idea of don't try and do everything at once. But also the flip side, don't try and do too little either. I think that's actually a good tip that maybe often we don't think about because there's a cost that comes with Copilot. So often we might be thinking, well, what's the cheapest way I can do this just to test the water? And I think that's a good tip. So, Nathan, just before we wrap up, if people want to find out a little bit more about what you do and maybe ways to get in touch, I mean, what's the best way to do that?
Probably the easiest way, a bit for self-promotion, thanks Paul, probably the easiest way would be to just reach out on LinkedIn, connect, send the message, always receptive to that, so get in touch.
Yep. Hey, and normally that's the correct answer. Don't give out your mobile number. I think that's always a good tip. But Nathan, this has been great. And we'll dig into the next episode a little bit into some of the things that you've seen that have worked less well, which I think are equally valuable tips. But for now, Nathan, thanks for coming on Tech Takeaways. Really appreciate your time.
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
And if you want to make sure you catch all future episodes of Tech Takeaways, including more shows with Nathan, then do subscribe. You can subscribe right here on YouTube by clicking the subscribe button down below. And you can subscribe in all good homes of podcasts. But until next time, thanks for joining us.